I'm going to go a little bit into what we're talking about when we talk about structured presentation. So when Susan, Elias, and I were planning out sort of what we were going to do for design track, I volunteered to take on structure and then sort of immediately panicked. I was a little bit worried that structure has sort of a corporate Microsoft XP sort of aesthetic, and that it sort of conjures these images of like deadly boring PowerPoint presentations where you don't say anything new or do anything new. And I think it was really good that that's the first place that I went to, because I had to really sit down and think about like what the value of structure is and how to talk about it in a way that was interesting. And sort of where I arrived at it is actually that I'll make a case for it later on, but structure doesn't have to be something you've seen before necessarily. It's just about being able to lead by telling people that you know where we're going. So where there's huge value in finding new ideas and sort of releasing ideas and like sort of discovering new space, being able to tell people that a certain outcome is going to happen, frankly, is great for easing anxiety. And I find that when you're embarking on something new with product owners, they're anxious. So structure is almost a way of sort of soothing. And it can sort of help you organize your own thinking to sort of get into it. So the next slides in the next little bit is an introduction to an activity that I have planned here. And we actually have more people in attendance than I predicted, but it's absolutely okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to plan that meeting. And you can see just how hard I'm working here to make this fun, because planning meetings is not necessarily fun. But Erin and I have had some really interesting conversations this year about how meetings are actually a design task, and figuring out how to get the correct activities for the correct people, get the right people in the room, create the right atmosphere is as much a user experience problem as designing the flow. I think earlier in my life, I thought of meetings as something that distracted you from your job as a designer, which is just getting as much work out there as you possibly can. But figuring out how to get the best ideas out of people and create an environment where they're really receptive to your work is just a huge, huge part of what we do. So for what we're doing, I want everybody to unmute. The secret is that I made it look like a game show, but it's actually an open forum. So first of all, why this? Sometimes using an established framework is the best way to handle a tricky situation. We all have go-to exercises that help us get results. And you're all smart, and I want to learn from you. And I want to, for folks who are not designers on this track, you have go-to exercises too. And really what I'm interested in this is hearing everybody talk through problems. So if you're not able to go like, oh, this sounds like a 2x2 and an experience map, that's really okay. I think hearing how different people would get the best results out of folks in meetings is really what we're after. So don't be afraid to not speak up. And when I say so, we can all unmute, but I have a little bit more sort of talking through it to get through. So my goal, and this is admittedly pretty ambitious, is that our answers become a page on our Notion with exercises to try if you're feeling stuck and people who can help you learn a new exercise. So Dave had put together a bunch of kickoff exercises in the Google Drive back in the day. And I think we can sort of extend the work that's already been there and just try and get all of the like prompts and conversation starters and interesting things to try out of our brains and onto a page so that we can use it as a resource. And I'm sort of willing to organize that a little bit, but we'll see if we get there, and no pressure if we don't. We can't like distill all of our knowledge in the space of half an hour. So this is a collaboration. Mark the board and speak up. I really do want you to unmute. I really want everybody talking. If you're more comfortable putting ideas down into the Figma board, there are spaces for each of the questions, and just go ahead and start writing. And it can be as messy as you want. We can clean it up later. This is going to move fast. If you don't get an idea on the board now, it's okay. We can go back and flesh it out later. I think one of the most productive things about something like this is the message that you get 2 days after, where somebody goes like, you know, I was thinking about this and I didn't say it in the moment, but blah, blah, blah. We'll keep building. So don't even worry about it. Finally, we can add links and examples later. I will follow up. So if you've seen something really excellent, I just saw a really, really great structured presentation last week from Jintel, starting the next phase of My Eye Doctor with Mandy. There are all kinds of things that I think would really help illustrate the concepts. But again, half an hour, and I'm talking through the first, 7 minutes of it. Got to keep moving. So for this, you're going to pick a card and you will get a hypothetical client meeting to plan. What activities would you run? Who would you include? Structure the hell out of this meeting, and I believe in you. So now I want everybody to unmute. And if somebody is willing to be called on, all they have to do is pick a card and the group is going to actually structure the meeting. So let's begin.
I want to pick a card. That sounds like the easiest part. I do that and I don't have to do anything else.
Okay, pick a card.
Ooh, 6.
6. All right. Well, you need to get clear next steps from stakeholders with competing needs. What do you do?
Should we just start typing on the thing or do
Yeah,
we...
you can start typing on the thing. You can start saying it out loud and I will do some typing for you. So first of all, clear next steps from stakeholders with competing needs. What activities would you run?
I would do some kind of activity that externalizes those different priorities or competing needs.
I can imagine either value sliders or a 2x2 of some kind of needs versus something, but maybe value sliders would be better because it's a shared framework.
So for value sliders, that's interesting to me because we have 5 things that we have to predefine to get people to make those choices. How would you figure out what the value sliders should be?
And maybe if you had already done the value sliders, it'd be a good time to go over them and say, like, are these still the shared values framework? But maybe if you had to come up with it from whole cloth, you probably don't have time in that meeting, I'm guessing.
This is, if Ben is here, this is something we encountered a lot on Rhythm, where stakeholders just didn't agree. And what we needed to do was design meetings that didn't necessarily reach any conclusions, but helped air that out. Ben, do you have any ideas for this one? Sorry calling you. I really do want everyone to unmute.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
I have one thought that's not necessarily an activity that's been run. I would like to have the different features or the different epics and have people dot vote and see which dot most, and then try to do a flat backlog or highest priority to least priority, and then just talk through that. I feel like that conversation might get a little weedy and might get a little heads, people not quite agreeing at that level, but maybe some type of dot voting would be cool.
So having people, yeah.
I was going to build on that as if you popcorn, what are all the possible next steps that we could do in the next week, or some framing, and then dot vote, or then talk through stack rank, or if you have a backlog of those things, either experiments or the things that could be done as outcomes.
Yeah,
I like that, Mandy.
That's awesome. And I also, we don't necessarily have to rely on things that we've done before here. If you have something that doesn't have a name for the activity, but there's something that you think would work, talk about it. Because I think a lot of these things don't have names, or they're combinations of other things, and they're really useful. So that's awesome. I think it's time to pick a new card. Who wants to pick a card? It's the easy part.
I'll pick 7.
7. All right. You want to convince a product manager to reprioritize a feature that just flunked a usability test. What do you do? So that could, yeah.
I was just thinking for the last one too, this could work like if you had a near now next framework where you were like able to move this thing from like, this is still a really good idea, but maybe it's not actual right now because we need to get more information. And so instead of saying like, let's not do this, instead like, let's move this from near, or I don't know what the now, near, next, whatever it is, move it just one category out as a way of framing prioritization as like a net benefit.
I think that's interesting because I think there's a blocker there, which is that more information step. And I think that there's also a getting people to agree on the goal of the feature so you can understand how to change it.
Oh yeah, that would be interesting to just go back to the why of the feature and just sort of checking in on the why.
Yeah. Who would you include in this?
I think definitely the product owner, product manager, the dev team as well. Like I always like sharing any user research with them, just so everyone has a clear understanding. But more so like not necessarily like this was like did not work at all. More so like this is what we learned, and here are like potential next steps forward, or like where does the team see this falling?
Nice. All right. Do we feel good about this one? We don't have to get through all 8, by the way. But do we want to keep going on this, or do we want to pick a new card?
See all the cards. This is awesome. The more we get to, the more insights we'll have.
Okay. Pick a card.
I feel equipped to do this as an engineering representative. I'm going to go ahead with 2.
It is planning poker inspired. You need to get visual feedback from people who aren't designers. What do you do?
Oh man, I picked the right one.
Yeah, tell me more.
So what activities would be run? Let's see. I would think that dev design pairing would expose designers to what developers are working on. I don't know if it needs to be a full-on meeting with all of the development team. So I think one-on-ones with the developers who are responsible for whatever feature that is.
So for folks who end up in meetings or end up maybe in a one-on-one with a developer who goes like, well, why is that red? I think I would like it to be blue. I think it would be better if it was blue. This is sort of the, I was going to say nightmare scenario, but that isn't quite right. But getting feedback that isn't necessarily operating within a system and gently redirecting it. What do you do?
I think one of the things, so I don't have very much experience having this go well for me, so I'm going to the things I've learned. But I think it's all about kind of helping people, either developers or clients, kind of establish a language and like introduce them to this idea of speaking to something visual. And like, I think if I could go back in time and change up some interactions that I've had, I think I would have started with very, very basics of like, taking the references that they make of like, oh, I really like this thing from Stripe, and really like setting aside some time to like talk through like, what is it about Stripe that you like? So I don't even know what kind of exercise this would be, but I think it would be kind of like a meeting where it would be a collection of like kind of creating a directory for them, which sounds a little ambitious, but it could have saved me a lot of time, I think, in the future, if we had a vocabulary bank somewhere. And it can be like, remember Stripe, you were talking about this animation that happens passively all the time when you're scrolling. Is that what you want in your website as well? Or do you want something more like over in like, oh, what was another example? I found like this other website that was kind of like a journal that had like these scribbles on it. It's like, were you thinking more Stripe or were you thinking more journal scribbles? Like helping them kind of come to a place where we all are speaking the same language, I think would have been something I would have done at the very beginning.
It made me think of like the adjective card sort that we do with clients for their brand. But what if you also did it for like the thing they liked? It's like, what are the 3 adjectives this embodies? And then you could go, we have a new design. They're like, I don't know between these 2. And you're like, which of these 2 embodies more playful? Can we look at it through the lens of the thing you said you liked, and we discuss the attributes of that thing?
Yeah.
I think that's sort of what is in that activity we did for collaboration. We were doing it on spectrums, but normally when I've done it, it's on one line, and it's from who do you want to be and who are you not. But the magic there is like finding the words that go with the visual imagery. And another trick I've played in the past is when I make a mood board, I actually put words in the mood board. So I'm starting to like bridge that gap from visuals to shared language. So that's kind of taking those adjectives, but like putting them closer to the visuals. So there's some sort of like stepping stone between just the wide open world of visuals and then agreement on what they mean. And you have to externalize that so that you can point to things and get more exact. And Elias isn't here, but he's done some interesting activities. I would just put a note that's like what Elias did on 20.
Elias is here.
He's there.
There you are.
Don't talk about
I lost him in the sea of reds and turquoises. Sorry. I don't know what you would call, because I think it was slightly different yet again, but achieving the same thing, what you did on 20 with like imagery and then giving them a sheet that they
would
rate stuff on.
Yeah. It was like a rating sheet. So it was like their initial reactions to a brand or a website, and they would rate and then use words to describe, to kind of get a sense of the polarities.
I've always wanted you to come back and show us that again, Elias.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can do that sometime. I would have to dig up what I
it.
named it, but I don't remember the name of it right now. But it's basically just understanding their direction, like where they feel like what they have affinity for, what they don't, and why.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds really interesting. So for this one, who would you include?
I feel like if going with the suggestion I made, I think this would have been in addition to the kickoff, or like an extension of the kickoff. Like knowing that visual design was so high on their trade-off sliders, it was yeah, cool. Well, kickoff part 2, visual design edition, and they'll have to deal.
Is it true that there's often just like one stakeholder who's like cares so much about this and they're just gonna like veto stuff? Is that true in people's experience, or is it off? I mean, it feels like it's a smaller group. Like many people defer this, maybe they care and can swoop in, but there's often one person who's like some key stakeholder.
To use like the 20 references or the hello world, there was two of them, but one of them drove all the decisions, and he drove all the decisions the way that none of us wanted it, and the other one we knew, so we just kind of had to deal with it. But it was that scenario where there's just one person that really cares a lot and has a high opinion, and you have to kind of like work with that.
I think there have also been sometimes I've been with product owners who are just not confident in this world. So sort of what Erin's saying around they don't have the same shared language, and what they do in response to that is go well, I'll ask my wife, I'll ask just random people and try and get a consensus. And I am going to tell you what the committee said so you can design that committee. And I find that being really direct about that and going oh, your wife wants to say, bring her in. She should participate in the exercise if she's going to have a say. And I wouldn't say it as passive aggressive as I am right now. But I think that being able to really encourage collaboration, but also really make a boundary that like anyone who is going to be offering design direction has to be in this meeting, I think has been really successful for me. Okay, somebody should pick another card.
Let's go with one.
One. You need to get a client to describe their vision for the look and feel of the product. What do you do? So I think this is a little bit different from people who aren't designers, can visual design feedback. This is someone who really knows what they want and has a lot of references in their mind. And actually, Ben, this is the Tolliver question for somebody who has been cranking on their idea of what this could be for years and now has to say it all at once. What do you do?
Mhm.
That same activity that we just talked about that I ran for 20 would work pretty good for this. So
Yeah.
put activity X right now, and then I will fill in the blanks when I dive through my files and find it.
The 20-second gut test.
Was that what it was?
What is that?
That's what Elias is describing. That's what he called it. I saved it.
And then we never had a good name for, again, the thing that we did for the collaboration thing. Analia, when she introduced it to me, called it the experience workshop, but that's too, that could mean anything, but that plotting, like imagery to plotting to language.
I also, I find that a lot of times clients will describe what they want in terms of other websites. So sort of what Erin was saying around like, if they keep bringing up Stripe or in Rhythm's case, Lemonade every day, have a screenshot of Lemonade nearby and get them to sort of be more specific about it. So I think there's an exercise around doing some competitive analysis and then getting clients to start circling things and marking up competitors or like inspirations pages.
Yeah, landscape of it.
Elias and I were in a BD once long ago where the client was like, we were talking about like something about like, how do you want the product to feel? And it was like a thing we hadn't encountered. It was a little different than the values thing. It was more like what feeling to evoke. And I could imagine an activity where you had those images or those competitors and there's these like feelings charts, the little radial things where you could mark up like what people thought, what feelings were being elicited, which is a framework we don't use too much.
Is that something like you're a Maserati or you're a Mazda? Like what's your like?
I think it was a little bit, it was some Australian ISP, and it was like we were talking, they specifically wanted feelings. And I was like, okay, I don't have a framework for like talking about feelings. But then there's another thing called like the 9 archetypes or whatever. Let me look that up. That was another way of looking at personifying brands. Ooh. Just trying to think of new things that we don't typically do.
So for something like this, it sounds like you would need a little bit of preparation work. So maybe getting them to pre-describe sort of where they are in the space so that you can present stuff for them to bounce off of. So whether that is like imagery in sort of like the exercise Suze did, or if it's competitive audit, or I think I've even done something like this with material design versus like ant design. And saying like, hey, so you have a feeling, but we need to get you that feeling for cheap. Which one of these is closer to it? So maybe the thing to present in terms of artifacts is just 2 polarities that they can bounce off of and start to sort of map relative. Okay, don't want to make it look like I'm the only person who knows the answer. I'm just excited about this stuff. Okay, let's
just add, like, I think like giving them homework, I think is a big deal, especially for like high-level stakeholders. They tend to have like vague ideas and maybe like a couple reference points, but haven't really put in the work to like, you know, build a case for it or like specify why or so I think doing some prep work ahead of an exercise is really valuable.
That's awesome. That's totally true. And I also find that sometimes people who like reacting in the moment and can sort of derail a meeting by going like, I'm just spitballing here. What if you did a completely different thing? If you ask them to do homework and stand behind their work, sometimes they have a little bit less weight over the future of the product, and that is helpful. All right, next card. This is our final card. It is almost 9:45.
I could pick a card.
Pick a card.
I'll pick 4.
4. You need feedback from a CEO with lots of opinions about the product and very little time to participate in the process. What do you do?
So this kind of relates to what I recently did. I created a presentation for the CEO to review, like beforehand, before we went over it. And I kind of explained things with like a description on the right, and then on the left, I have like a wireframey design so they can kind of see like, this is what we're kind of getting at. And yeah, this was for my eye doctor. And it's just like, it's something that the CEO usually preferred. Like, she wants to see a video, so she kind of was prepped and knew what to say or what she wanted to have an opinion on. So that was pretty helpful.
What kind of video did she want to see?
So it's like a video of us going through the presentation that we would go through in the meeting. So that's like talking through the slides. We would just like not videotape, but tape ourselves as we were like in a Teams presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we just talked over everything, went over all the points that we were going to say during the meeting with like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that way she felt like she was prepared and that she knew everything that was going on in the project.
That's awesome. I've done a thing, and sometimes it goes really well, and sometimes it completely blows up in my face, where I start a meeting with, here's what we're presenting, here are the decisions you're going to need to make. And telling them like, hey, we don't actually need to resolve all of this right now. What I need to know is if the data model for version 1 or the data model for version 2 is the thing that makes sense. Mm-hmm. They'll go like, oh, okay, I know how to scope my feedback. But sometimes if I set the premise that strongly, they'll reject the premise completely and just like go nuts. So you have to vibe it out with your stakeholder.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, we are at 9:45. Thank you for structuring things with me. I wish I had a stronger wrap up, but maybe I'm going to throw it to the group if there are any closing thoughts or anything that you want to see as next steps with this.
I would only say that the thing that to me is the most inspiring is to think outside the like set of activities you normally do day to day and figure out a way to kind of loop those back into the group as folks come up with new ones. I think we do reach for the same tools over and over again, and as we get more specific about the scenario we're in, it is clear that there's probably other things to consider. So thank you.
Yeah, I love it when people come in with new sort of ways to do this, and I feel like Mandy has done really excellent work giving us templates that we can fall back on for some of these exercises so we don't have to invent it whole cloth every time. So thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you at the next talk.